Welcome to the Church in the Wild podcast. You'll be hearing the words from worship from Sunday, March 15th, where we continue our discussion on how to live again, looking at rising from the ashes. If you want to find out more about Church in the Wild and all of our upcoming events and programs, just go to churchinthewild.org. Thanks for listening.
I'm Barb, and in nature, each spring brings a resurrection of plants and animals that have been hibernating, and we can count on that happening every year. But a different kind of resurrection can happen in areas where there's been a complete destruction of natural habitats. So in places where people have cleared all the vegetation and driven away the wildlife to pave a giant parking lot, for example, and I mean a giant parking lot, like maybe industrial complex parking lot or something. Or places where volcanic lava has erupted and covered everything with new barren rock. There can be a resurrection there as well, but it's going to take much longer. So when you look at a large sterile parking lot or the huge expanses of bare rock left after lava has cooled, it's hard to believe that a day could come in the future where a forest could be standing there. And it can occur without any help from humans. In fact, it happens when humans leave it alone. So once a parking lot is abandoned and not maintained, small cracks start to appear in pavement. The same is true for rock that gets weathered by rain and ice over time. And small spores carried by the wind and rain can find their way into these small cracks. Lichens, does everybody know what a lichen is? Yeah. Lichens are the green and sometimes they're orangish, crusty things that you see growing on bare rock faces and tree bark. They're actually a combination of two organisms. They're an algae and a fungus that are so intertwined that they seem like one organism. And the algae provides food for the fungus through photosynthesis, and the fungus provides moisture and nutrients for the algae. So they give each other everything that they need to survive. They don't need soil to grow and spread. So they're one of the first life forms, along with mosses, that make their home in the now cracked surfaces. As they continue to grow, they cause the surface to break down more and into much smaller particles. And as they die, their organic matter gets added to the particles. And now we have soil, because that's all soil is, organic matter and ground up rock. It's thin soil, but it's soil. And as long as there's even a little soil, any seeds that blow into these cracks now containing soil might germinate. And grasses are the first types of plants that will reestablish themselves in this once sterile place. And as the grasses grow and spread, the cracks get bigger and bigger. The soil becomes thicker and richer. And now the seeds of small shrubs can grow there, and larger weeds can take hold and begin to grow. It can take 15 years or more to get to the point of having shrubs and grasses resurrected, but it's progress. And once this stage is reached, the birds, insects, rodents, and other animals that need that habitat will start to move in. And they carry seeds with them of other organisms, and they add nutrients to the soil with their wastes and decomposing bodies. So next, the woody trees that need full sun to grow can start taking hold. And in this part of the country, we're talking about pines, willows, birches, and aspens, which are some of the fast-growing trees that don't tolerate shade, so they'll start filling in the area quickly. And then animals that need those trees for shelter and food will follow. And then as those trees get thicker and taller and produce shade, the more shade-tolerant trees, like beeches and maples, will begin to pop up. And eventually, as more shade covers the ground, the saplings of oaks, hemlocks, and spruces will flourish and become more dominant. They'll replace the earlier fast-growing trees that needed full sunlight to grow. All along the way, the animals will follow the plants, so eventually, around here, deer, foxes, porcupines, and the animals we commonly see in our mature forests will make their homes among these trees. So depending on the climate, it can take 100 years or much, much longer than 100 years for that abandoned parking lot or barren rock to transform into a mature forest ecosystem. And there'll be setbacks along the way from storms, fires, diseases, and people clearing the land. But the cycle of rebirth and resurrection will start again whenever it gets the chance.
That is amazing. Thank you. I'm always like mind boggled when I'm reminded the land at Sky Lake used to be a farm. That mature, beautiful forest seems like it's been there forever, right? It's only like 100 years old.
My name is Wednesday Lampinen, and our poem today is On Pie Day. I remember baking pies with my son. Sorry, let me do that again. Our poem's title is On Pie Day, I Remember Baking Pies with My Son by Rosemerry, Wahtola, Trommer. Tonight, instead of serving pie, I serve the memory of pie. Serve the memory of pumpkins we grew in the garden, then processed into custard. Serve the memory of years we made gluten-free crusts. Serve the memory of your first rhubarb plant that will rise more robust this spring. Memory of thinly sliced apples, key limes, lemon meringue, and all those tart cherries we harvested together. I serve the joy we shared in celebrating a constant necessary to the geometry of the world. I serve the thrill in knowing there is something both transcendental and infinite, something death can never touch, something ubiquitous that defines the world we inhabit. And though it is math, it is no less love, something that helps us understand our universe, something that hints at the grand design that amidst the great catastrophe continues to hold it all together.
I'm Kaden. Our wisdom today comes from the 8th Master Lessons of Nature by Gary Ferguson. Nature is all about keeping what's most essential from perishing, and then with those essentials in hand, restoring vitality and stability as quickly as possible. It's worth noting that in many cases, life systems don't simply survive such upheaval, they thrive. Over many thousands of years, plants, insects, birds, and mammals evolved to take advantage of the bounty healthy fire leaves in its wake. Fire releases nutrients that have been bound up in the trees as well as ground plants, feeding them back in the soil as ash. Please join me in the response to this wisdom in the program. From the ashes of destruction, new life grows. May the fires of life burn away all that is not essential.
All right. How to live again is our question this month. And I realized it's kind of the question of life. How do we get back? We know how to live, right? It comes naturally the first time. We're just born. Here we are. But how do we keep living after everything changes? We talked about how there are many types of resurrection, and this is kind of what we mean about like how do we live again, not necessarily coming back from the dead physically ourselves, but how do we come back from those experiences that feel like a death, or when someone else dies, or those times when the life as we knew it is no longer. How do we keep going? All these types of resurrection that we talked about the first Sunday, we realized they're all transformation is really what we're talking about. Resurrection is a transformation, and there's no going back to the old form. Once something goes through the cycle of change, right, you're not going to get back to where you were unless you keep going all the way around, basically. And so living again requires a trust in the transformative power of the Spirit. We know no good thing ever dies, right? Thanks to Shawshank Redemption. But no thing is ever lost is really what that means, right? Our whole planet is a planet of resurrection, of renewing, of, something breaking down and then getting reformed into new, with its old atoms into something new. And last week we talked how every tradition, of course, then would have tales of resurrection, right? If this is our planet, a planet of constant resurrection, then every group of people who's lived on this planet is going to have these stories of resurrection that teach us that death isn't the end of the story. Something always comes after death, whether it's our own or someone else's or a thing or whatever, there's always something next. So a few years ago, we read the book that we just heard the quote from, The 8 Master Lessons of Nature by Gary Ferguson. It is one of the books I will recommend to everyone who asks, what book should I read? This one. It is so good. And Gary Ferguson has written lots of books, and he's basically like a nature journalist. He's written for National Geographic. He's spent like a year following the wolf pack in Yellowstone. So just like living in nature. I mean, he has done that, right? He's lived in nature, written all these books, talked to all these different people, and put it all into 8 master lessons that he thought we should know. So it's really rich. My copy is full of underlines and highlights and notes. But this chapter, he titled, the chapter that the wisdom came from, is called After Disaster and Disruption, Nature Teaches Us the Fine Art of Rising Again. And I love to think about it that way. It is a fine art. It is this thing that maybe we could practice and improve in rising again. And it just made me think, we've talked about, one of my favorite names for God is the atomic artist, or maybe the atomic upcycler. And here they are at it again. In this chapter, he talks about the devastation he witnessed after a major fire that went through Yellowstone, and how distraught he was to see the aftermath of it. But he talks about how forests need fires, actually, and the practice of the indigenous tribes who lived there to do controlled burns is actually, we find out now, what we should be doing. We sort of banned those and stopped doing them for a long time because we thought we knew better. But this practice is actually hugely beneficial. Controlled burns are very important, especially for the species of some trees that live out there, like the long pole pines. Their pine cones will not open to release seeds until they've been burned in a fire. So it's like they know these seeds will just hang out here until a fire comes through, burns down the older trees, and then the new trees will grow. It's an important part of the life cycle of the forest, especially in the Northwest. And then, once all the trees are gone, like we heard Barb talking about, grasses and bushes and shrubs all get a chance. In a mature forest, they're struggling, right? Like you can't have lush berry bushes in the shade, right? They need sunlight. So sometimes a fire is needed as a reset. And like we heard in the wisdom, it releases all those stored nutrients. So those giant trees, those long pole, it's called a long pole pine because it's what they would use for their poles. It's a tall tree. Those are just trapping up all the nutrients, all the nitrogen that the soil needs. And after a long time, nothing new can grow until a fire comes through and returns all those nutrients back to the soil through the ash. So I'm going to read a quote from this chapter. He says, "What at first glance might have seemed like calamity, like an ending, will in fact reveal itself to be a highly coordinated, intensely robust, multifaceted burst of creation." And that was his big revelation when he didn't just go see the destruction and say, oh, how depressing. My beautiful Yellowstone, is reduced to ashes in so many areas. He stayed. He kept going back day after day and was able to notice the tiny little changes that started to come slowly. The little flower here, the bee coming through to check out what's going on. And he knew that was a good sign. There was a burst of creation on the way. More life was coming. So he learned the consequence of disruption is growth. Think about that for our own lives. It's hard to see that when you're in the middle of the disruption, right? But once you okay, you're safe, you're not in the fire anymore, you're out of the disruption, you can say, all right, well, here's my opportunity for growth. Here we go. And he says, I've started trying to build clearer connections to what feels like my essential nature after having this experience at Yellowstone. He says that essential nature, those core qualities that can withstand whatever challenge burns through. Recovery from fire in nature is a communal act, a magnificent display of interdependence. I'm reminded to nurture my relationships, knowing that any one of us could draw on the others when disaster occurs. So, good job nurturing your relationships right this very moment, right? You showed up somewhere to be with other people. That's huge and hard and takes intention and commitment to, hey, it's good to be in relationship with other people. And that is exactly why our intention for the year as Church in the Wild is to nurture these connections and to take care of each other in practical ways whenever we can, which also means naming our needs, right? We've talked about this, but we're going to keep talking about it because it's good to hear it over and over. We need each other, and we need each other even more when disaster strikes. But it's really hard in the aftermath of disaster to go build those relationships, right? You kind of have to do that in advance. Knowing that that's a part of life, right? The disaster is going to strike somebody, somewhere, and we can be there to show up and help. Plus, our more than human communities, our animals, the plants, our land, can help carry some of the load too, especially when disaster strikes. It is scientifically proven that spending time in nature helps us heal trauma and promote overall wellness. And he talks about this so beautifully in the book. He talks about the most disruptive experience in his life when he and his wife were in a major car accident and his wife died, and he was physically disabled for like a year. And he goes through all the emotions of that and how difficult it was and how healing it was to let people care for him, even though he resisted it at first, and to just go, even though he couldn't hike, he couldn't do all those things he was used to doing in nature, to just go be in nature. He says we can take our heartbreak to the woods or the ocean, and those places will help us just as much as sitting with a person can help. So as we think about these periods of catastrophe, sometimes they have that, I don't know, unintended, or maybe it is intended, but they have the consequence of helping us grow even closer to people. Helping us grow closer to nature and the essential essence of life itself even. You know, think about, it's always, we hear this after a community has a natural disaster, right? A flood, a storm. They all say, but how the community showed up, how we got to know our neighbors in that moment of crisis, right? It's incredible that is like a consequence of disaster, this good and beautiful thing. As the Spirit would have it, I came across, I call them like TikTok philosophers, I don't know, these really amazing, smart people that are influencers, and I'm grateful that I can hear them. Her name is Eliza Day. And this video, I'm going to read a quote of what she shared because it just hits to the center of what we're talking about. She says, the period of time when my dad was actively dying and then dead and in the process of being buried, that time was so rich because it was just so real. It was the most alive I've ever felt, and the closest I've ever been to what it really means to be human. It felt timeless. I will never forget the experience of shoveling dirt onto his casket. And as I did that, I felt ancient. I felt connected to every single human being who has ever been alive, because anyone who has lived and walked this planet has buried their dead. I transcended the experience of being myself and just became human being on planet Earth, burying my dead. That was the most meaningful experience of my life. And this peak experience led me to the conclusion that the meaning of life is that we die. But through that experience, she had this like spiritual revelation. In this life, death is required. Whether the eventual end of this body death or the million of deaths that we go through day in and day out. In life, death is required. We can't avoid it. And there's not always a why to it, right? That frustrates me sometimes. I want to know, why do bad things happen? Who is to blame? But I return to Mary Oliver. In one of her beautiful poems, she says, what moreover is catastrophe? Is it the sharp sword of God, or just some other wild body loving its life? And the rest of the poem is about a bear eating a beehive for the honey, but all the bees that get killed in that process. Death is a part of life. We can't avoid it. We can't even always explain it. Death comes. What's ours is to decide is how we engage the transformation of death. I'm sure if, or when, these bodies that we have return to the earth from whence they came, we'll have so many more opportunities to engage that transformation for ourselves. And it's weirdly exciting sometimes to think about. The benefit of fire is that what remains after, what is left after catastrophe?
That weird black stuff, that
ash, right? Literally, yes, that's what's left. But contained within the ash is the essential essence of life. It's all those nutrients. What's left to us after we experience a transformation, a death, a resurrection, is purely what's essential. In the Bible, there's a lot of talk. I thought it was just New Testament, but it's also in the Hebrew Testament, where they talk about struggles being like a refining fire to us. That when we go through hardship, it burns away the excess, like you would for a precious metal. You put it in the fire, burns away all that is not that. So you have a pure metal left. So our struggles can do that to us, these hardships. But we don't have to wait for them, right? At least I don't think so. Because the love I feel from the Creator, whatever word you have, the love that I can feel, especially in nature and community, that is a refining fire too. That tends to burn away all the excess. And I think that's sometimes what the disaster, the catastrophe leads us to. It burns away everything but that love. When Eliza was burying her dad, all her busy life, work, emails, none of that mattered anymore. All that mattered was that love that was shared and planted in them, and that is shared all around her in that moment, you know? So yes, we are refined to the essence of life in many ways, from disaster and from just getting to experience the great love of the universe. A love so intense, it burns away everything but itself, the essential essence within. And so that is what we are left with after catastrophe strikes. And it is the best soil to plant new seeds of life in. And we get that beautiful example directly from the forest, from nature. So as we face trials, many deaths, catastrophes, big or small, know that what is essential will remain. No good thing ever dies. The love that made us will remain with us and see us through to the new life that will rise from those ashes. May it be so.
I invite you to feel your feet on the floor, your seat in the chair. Move your body any way you need to be a little more comfortable. I'm noticing I want to move my neck and shoulders a little. If you prefer to lay down or stand up, that's fine too. And I invite you to close your eyes or lower your gaze or look out the window. And begin to draw your attention inward. Notice the next breath entering and leaving your body. No need to change it, just become aware of it. You've been breathing, you've been being breathed all day without needing to pay attention to it. The breath is just a gift. I invite you to do a brief body scan from the top of your head down through your scalp. If you notice places of tension or pain, invite them to loosen even 10%. Check in with your jaw, your eyes, your forehead, your throat and the back of your neck, the front and back of your shoulders, down your arms and out through your fingertips. And bring your attention back up to your torso, inside and out. Your ribs from the front, around the sides to the back. Your spine, your sacrum and tailbone, your hips and pelvic bowl. Your upper legs, knees, lower legs, feet, and toes. And as you take the next breath in, bring your attention back up to the center of yourself. And as you settle into this time of meditation, bring to mind the image of fire. Not just flame, but fire in all its forms. A flickering candle, a glowing hearth in the cold, a campfire outside, the spark of an idea, the blaze of a wildfire. Fire is ancient and considered sacred by many cultures. It warms, cooks, guides the way. It also burns, devours, and clears. In the Christian scriptures, and I believe in many other traditions as well, fire often means that God is near. What is the fire in you right now? What's fueling your spirit? What ignites your passion? What lights your way through the darkness? Take a moment to feel the warmth of the fire inside. that holy energy. Let it grow and let the warmth spread through your chest, your hands, your torso, your breath. And now imagine you're holding something in your hands, maybe a dry branch, brittle with old fears, regrets, burdens, old ways of being that no longer serve you, things you've outgrown but held on to, pain that no longer serves you. Ideas about God, about yourself, about the world that no longer bring life. What do you need to let burn? What needs to turn to ash so the soil of your soul can be made ready for new growth? When you're ready, offer that dry, brittle branch and all the things that are attached to it to the flame. Just whatever you're ready to release, offer it to the flame. And watch the flames receive what you offer. No judgment, just grace. Grace from this fire of transformation, this fire of creation, this fire of resurrection. And feel the warmth of that fire, of that transformation. Ashes remain, but the burden is gone. The ground of your being is more open, soft, sacred, ready. Ash is not the end. It's the beginning of what is coming, of what is becoming. Out of ash forests return. From scorched earth, new life breaks through. Into this space, what is beginning to rise in you? What small tendrils do you sense starting to rise ever so slowly? What new beginning is ready to be kindled? Maybe it's courage, compassion, creativity, love, clarity, or something else. Let it flicker into life. Let the flame of the new thing rise into your spirit. Let what is holy remain. Let what's ready to go fall away. And as you sit with the mystery of fire, its warmth and its risk, its power, its destruction, its light and warmth, its grace, know that the sacred, the Holy One, the energy of life is in the flame, is in the ashes, is in the light and the warmth, is in the letting go, and is in the new life and resurrection. And as we prepare to close this time of meditation, offer gratitude for anything you might have received. Offer prayers for anything you need more support with. And offer those new tendrils of growth your support. Your protection, your nurturing. And when you're ready, taking your time, very slowly bring your attention back to the circle and very, very slowly open your eyes, taking your time.
Thanks for listening. If you want to support Church in the Wild and the work we do in striving for environmental and social justice, just head on over to our website, churchinthewild.org, and click the donate link at the top. There you can make a donation, set yourself up as a recurring supporter, or you can buy something from our Redbubble shop. We're so glad you're with us on this journey, following the Spirit through creation, adventure, and restoration. Until next time.